Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. We are taking a look today at the Buffalo Sabres once again, as Jack Eichel had his press conference the other day at the end of the regular season, and his discontent was pretty hard to ignore throughout that interview. We're going to be taking a look at Jack Eichel, Rasmus Ristolainen, and Sam Reinhart in this video. So let's just get right down into things. So over the past couple weeks, we've heard a lot about Jack Eichel. Once again, we heard it at the trade deadline, before the deadline. We've heard it over the past really couple of months. And usually, when there's smoke, there's fire. You've probably heard that saying before, and I could see that in this case, guys. It's one of those things where you're seeing a guy in Jack Eichel who's been there now for a couple of years, and they just have had no success. And we're seeing that with maybe not just Jack Eichel. Sam Reinhart, his contract ends this offseason, right? He's a free agent this summer. Rasmus Ristolainen, he is a unrestricted free agent in the summer of 2022. That's next summer. So the three probably biggest guys on the Buffalo Sabres are either Jack Eichel is not a free agent, but if he decides next, in training camp, I'm not joining training camp. I don't want to play for the Sabres anymore. I'm done. Well, now the Sabres have a big issue on their hands. So do they decide to extinguish it while his value is somewhat of some sort, because at that point when he's not playing for the team, management has their hands up against, their backs against the wall at that point. And if his value isn't low enough at this point, it could get even worse if they don't know how to manage Jack Eichel here. And the problem is, if you guys haven't realized, Jack Eichel toward the end of the season was missing a lot of games. Now, I think there were a couple of factors. The main reason everybody was saying was, well, he might have had the virus. Well, that has been debunked. He did not have it. It is a herniated disc in his neck, which means he has to figure out. So basically what it comes down to, and a lot of people don't realize this in the hockey world, but management decides, and the coaching staff decides whether a guy, if he's under contract, whether he's allowed to have a certain surgery or not. So basically, there's two different surgeries Jack Eichel could have on his neck. One is he could have the one that is more of a safer bet. It's been around for a long time, but he's never going to heal completely. It's not going to be healed, exactly the way he would like it. That's the first option, which the Sabres want him to do the safer option, right? Because he still can play. It just won't be at his, he won't ever be 100%. The second way is he could be closer to 100%, but there's always the caveat. There's always a but to that, right? There is more risk involved in that. Now, they didn't really explain what the risk is necessarily. I would assume that it could actually make it worse. But the thing is, Jack Eichel at 23, 24 years old, he's a young stud. He's not even in his prime yet. He's willing to take the risk. He's saying, listen, I don't want this surgery if I want the risky surgery where I could potentially be back to 100% and not settle for maybe not I'm more likely to be between 80 and 90%. That's more likely, but I'll never be 100%. And there's a chance, hockey players have used this risky surgery before, and Jack Eichel wants it, but management, Kevin Adams, the Pagulas, whoever, have told him, we'd rather the less risk averse. We want you to get that one instead. And if the management doesn't sign off on him getting the riskier surgery, he is not allowed to get it. So now, that has been a reason he hasn't been playing, is because his neck's been bothering him. The team hasn't been very good anyway. And there's been so much drama around his lack of production this season and his value going down because he's not scoring, and his frustration and everything together. It's just a mess. So it creates this weird situation where, what even is Jack Eichel's value? Because at his best, when he's a point-per-game player, he's a franchise talent, you could command probably 4 first-round picks out of Jack Eichel. But right now, is that value there for Jack Eichel? And that may be why more teams are in on Jack Eichel, because they realize, hey, listen, he has a lot of potential, but his value is not where it could be. or should be for that matter, if he's handled in our situation. Most managements around the league feel they have a big ego, and they're going to say, listen, they aren't controlling him properly. Maybe we'll give up 2 or 3 first-round picks, but when we're done with him after a season, he will be worth 4-round picks to us and to the rest of the league because we are able to manage this player better. That's the point of trades. You want to make a player better and give up a lesser player. That's the point of a trade, right? So, we could see teams here swirling around once again. We've heard these rumors before, the Rangers, the Kings, and other teams. So we'll be getting into that now. So looking at teams that I think could be interested in Jack Eichel. I know I went on a little of a tangent there for Jack Eichel, but I think it's important to mention that surgery concept. So Jack Eichel, some teams, right? We've heard about some teams that are a little bit, of an outlier, but they've been talked about. The Toronto Maple Leafs, which is crazy. The Minnesota Wild. We've heard teams like the Philadelphia Flyers, who most recently have said maybe Nolan Patrick's available. Could Patrick be a big piece in that trade? What about a team like the Calgary Flames, right? They have a couple of young guys on their team. Could the Calgary Flames maybe go for a guy like Jack Eichel? The Arizona Coyotes are another team that would be interesting as well. They're looking for a face to that franchise. And maybe it involves a guy like Jacob Chikrin or Clayton Keller. But maybe they're willing to make that move, right? Or Oliver Ekman-Larsson, right? For all we know. What about the New Jersey Devils? Where do the Devils stand? Would they be willing to move a guy like Nico Hischier? Well, they have Nico Hischier as their captain now, so probably not him. But what about Jack Hughes? What if they traded a guy like Jack Hughes and Damon Severson and maybe a first to get Jack Eichel? They have the assets. Do they want to make that deal, though? That's another question. The Boston Bruins. We've heard a lot about the Bruins recently. He played in Boston in his college days, so he obviously has that connection there. So will the Bruins work? Well, supposedly the price tag is you got to start with either David Pastrnak or Charlie McAvoy. Do the Boston Bruins want to do that? That's something they have to figure out. What about the LA Kings? Again, another team with a plethora of young prospects. Alex Turcotte, Quentin Byfield, Gabriel Velarde, Carl Grundstrom, Arthur Kaliev, Cal Peterson, Jonathan Quick. They could trade one of those guys. There's plenty of guys that could be traded out of LA. So what's the price there? But again, they have assets to work with. And of course, the one everybody's been talking about very highly is him going to the Big Apple and playing with the New York Rangers. And the reason this is such a big deal is because the Rangers have a lot of assets. They've had a little bit of turnover here over the last couple of months. I could see a deal here with the Rangers. There's a couple of reasons. The first being Jack Eichel. Okay, he stays in the Northeast. That's one thing, right? 2, the Rangers have a plethora of assets and draft picks. And the Rangers aren't going to want to hear all these names I could say get thrown around in this deal, but I think Kaapo Kakko, you're willing to give up Kakko, especially with how the season ended with him. So let's say a guy like Kakko gets thrown in the conversation. Alexi Lafreniere is off the table, so that's gone. So if it's guys like Kaapo Kakko, what about, I hate to say this, Nils Lundqvist, Keandre Miller, Braden Schneider? Those are the kind of names we could see the Rangers have to throw around in a deal for Jack Eichel. We're talking about Jack Eichel here, okay? What about Mika Zibanejad? His contract ends next offseason. Do they maybe look to move Zibanejad, right? So, Chris Kreider. These are all guys that the Rangers could maybe look to move. Buchnevich, or Georgiev. That's why I think the Rangers are such an attractive option, because if they're able to move out some money, they can make a deal work. And they have guys that the Sabres could want. They have goaltenders, defensemen, forwards, whatever you want, draft picks. The Rangers are going to be willing to give that up for Jack Eichel. So the Rangers are a fit there. Now, this is something that a lot of people maybe don't realize. Now, Chris Drury, there is a connection to Chris Drury with the Buffalo Sabres. He was on the Buffalo Sabres in the mid-2010s or in the mid-2000s. Chris Drury was a New York Ranger, so he has a tie to Buffalo. Now, I don't know if he has a tie necessarily to Kevin Adams, but Chris Drury does have connections, and maybe he knows somebody in the organization, or maybe they can make that deal work. So that's something else to add some fuel to the fire there, if you will. And if the Rangers get a new head coach, if they want a little bit of a change of scenery in the locker room, maybe a guy like Jack Eichel could be that solution. And talk about a big name for your team. I mean, Mika Zibanejad has been one of the bigger names. You know, Artemi Panarin obviously has been a big name. You have Alexis Lafreniere. You bring in Jack Eichel, you're looking for an attendance spike with the New York Rangers. That is the hope and the dream that they're always looking for. But the problem is, in the New York market in particular, it's very hard to compete because you look at teams like the New York Giants, the Yankees. They're always adding the next big thing. And that's something that I think the Rangers fall victim to as well. You know, especially with what they did with Kevin Shattenkirk back, in free agency a while back. They did this with, Artemi Panarin. They gave him a lot of money. Now, it has worked out for the most part, but still, they're giving Panarin a lot of money as a winger. That may hinder them in their ability to get a guy like Jack Eichel in now. So now they want Jack Eichel. He's the next big thing. Alexis Lafreniere was the big thing last year. Capo Caco was the big thing the year before that. Like, there's always the next biggest, greatest thing. It's the new shiny object. And I feel like the Rangers fall victim to that. And maybe this is a good move. They trade Jack Eichel. But do you want to give up a potential top 4, maybe even top 2 defenseman in Keandre Miller, Alex Georgiev, a first-round pick, and Capo Caco? That seems like a lot for a guy that could have this risky injury, with his neck, this risky surgery, and he ends up, at $10 million per season, or even $11 million per, I think it's 10. He's making $10 million per season for the next 6 years. That's a risk that the Rangers are taking on for that potential star franchise name with Jack Eichel. But again, that looks like a very dirty first line. If you have Jack Eichel down the middle, Artemi Panarin, and Alexis Lafreniere on the wing, that top line, that is a pretty lethal first line. And the depth starts to become more of an issue now because you probably won't be able to sign Zibanejad next offseason. So who's your second line center? Ryan Strome? Okay. Vitaly Kravtsov maybe. You still hopefully keep, you could kiss Buchnevich goodbye this offseason. So, these are the things that maybe Ranger fans don't want to think about. So even trading Georgiev, a first, Kako, and Miller, you could still lose potentially one of or both of Zibanejad and Pavel Buchnevich as well. So there's just a lot that is going on with the Rangers there. This kind of turned into a Rangers video, but let's go back to the Eichel situation. But even with all of that, I think Jack Eichel is the best fit for the New York Rangers. I have Eichel going to the Rangers. Now, you know what? I don't even know if I want to make another video. I feel like this has gone on long enough. This is the Eichel video because I just don't see how Eichel, goes to a team like Boston or Arizona. Like, it's going to be LA or the Rangers. I truly believe it's going to be one of those two teams. A big market team that wants the next shiny object. And LA is known for that, and New York as well is known for that. And I think they're the most willing to give up the assets, other than, Arizona wouldn't give up, or even Boston may not give up. I think the Rangers and LA are just the right side and the right amount of desperation where they're willing to give up what it takes to the Buffalo Sabres for Jack Eichel. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Where do you see Jack Eichel going? Legitimately, realistically, I think it's going to be the New York Rangers or the Los Angeles Kings. But let me know what you think down below. If you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see more videos like this, make sure, if you are not already, to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. Guys, like I say, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time.